This story right here that you're about to witness on this particular morning is a story that should have been documented and recorded and made available to the public years and years ago. And I guess it was, but it just didn't quite blare out like some of the other stories. So if you don't mind, please listen to this story that literally brought tears to my eyes as I was sitting and watching it.
The second battle for the Philippines in World War II was going to be fought under entirely different circumstances than the first time. Again, America and Japan had locked horns over the strategic islands. But this time, the United States and its huge armada would be the aggressor.
It is considered a turning point in World War II. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, over 4 days in October of 1944, allowed the Allies to retake control of the Philippines from Japan. More than 200,000 naval personnel took part in the battle. Historians believe it to be the largest naval confrontation in world history. The U.S. Navy lost 7 ships, including the USS Johnston, which had been unseen by human eyes for nearly 80 years, until this week. David Martin has the story.
At 20,000 feet, visibility is very limited, even with a spotlight. But that whole number leaves no doubt. This is the wreck of the destroyer USS Johnston, 75 years after it went down in the last great naval battle of World War II.
The Johnston is one of the most famous wrecks in all of naval history.
Operating a submersible with an unlimited diving depth, Victor Vescovo found the Johnston 4 miles beneath the Philippine Sea, the deepest wreck ever discovered, much deeper than the Titanic.
We kept going deeper and deeper and deeper into the black. Then out of the murk, we could just slowly see the bow.
What was that moment like?
Oh my goodness. The guns of the ship were still pointed in the proper direction of where they were firing when they went down. The ship still looked like it was fighting, like it just still hadn't given up.
The entire crew either went down with the ship or scrambled off just before it sank. 186 sailors died.
All of those in the battle that were lost, the remains were never located.
Warren Sterling's uncle Elton was the Johnston's executive officer. Have you ever found out exactly how he perished?
They were in the water for 52 hours before being picked up. Seems like he swam off and either he drowned or a shark got him.
The wreckage will remain untouched, but its discovery has brought to the surface the astonishing story of the USS Johnston.
It's one of the most valiant actions in the entire history of the United States Navy.
Retired Admiral Samuel Cox, director of the Naval History Command, has known the story of the Johnston since he was a little boy.
I was into naval history before I could read, looking at pictures in my dad's books. So I knew the story of Ernest Evans, the commander of the Johnston. He was a childhood hero of mine.
Everybody should know the story of Commander Ernest Evans and his actions at the Battle of Leyte Gulf.
Evans was the first Native American to be awarded Medal of Honor in the United States Navy.
General Douglas MacArthur had just waded ashore in the Philippines as the U.S. closed in on Japan, and the Johnston was part of a naval force protecting MacArthur's supply ships.
On the morning of the 25 October 1944, that force was surprised by a vastly superior Japanese force that was able to get through a strait undetected during the night and show up unexpected.
This is an artist's depiction of the Johnston as Commander Evans led the charge against the Japanese armada.
It was 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. And without waiting for orders, he turned and took his ship and charged that entire Japanese force and was able to put a torpedo in the lead Japanese cruiser.
That sounds like a suicide charge.
If he didn't do something, the Japanese were going to overrun and sink the entire force. Then they're into General MacArthur's supply ships and troop transports.
So what's at stake here is MacArthur's return to the Philippines?
Essentially, yes, sir.
For a few desperate hours off the Philippine island of Samar, Evans and his ship were in the Japanese bullseye.
The first hits basically killed multiple people on the bridge. So he's trying to fight this battle while standing in dead bodies and body parts. He's had 2 of his fingers torn off, and yet he still has to maintain the presence of mind to continue to fight that ship.
he still had to maintain the presence of mind to maintain that ship that had almost 190 men on it. These are the heroic, courageous acts that not only these people was willing to sacrifice, but thousands and thousands and thousands more that stood up against this type of tyranny, that stood up against this type of aggression, to fight for our democracy of what we have today as far as a free democracy. Without the sacrifice of these men and women that done what they done during World War II, we as a country today would not be who and what we are. We would have been dictated to by evil demonic rulers that would have forced us to have been enslaved, imprisoned, subject to their command at their will. This is the reason why that I personally am an activist for the military. Now, one may say, well, that means that you believe in war. No. I rather prevent war, regardless whether it's the war of humanity down here on the planet or it's a heavenly war. I rather prevent a war. But whenever it comes to standing up for our rights and for that in which what God has favored us towards standing up against in a righteous sense, I'll be one of the first ones on the battle line. I'll be one of the first ones to hold the American flag high. I'll be one of the first ones that will tell the American military, 2 thumbs up, our hats off to you. Because I know that without them, we would not be who we are today. So thank God that this story finally has been released out into the general public, in which, like I said, it had been released to the public, but it hadn't made no big splash. Their glory had been taken from them, and now I feel like that now, since this has occurred, like I said, that boat was down in the water almost 4 miles. 4 miles down, or maybe even a little more than 4 miles. That's a long way down. And to think that they had found it all intact, or basically how it was whenever it actually submerged and went down. To think that they had explored and found it, that in and of itself is a miracle. But it's high time to give these men their dignity, their honorable dignity towards what they stood for and why they died during the time that they died. It's high time that America stopped after the 75th anniversary of World War II in identifying and realizing just exactly what was at stake. What was at stake whenever we fought up against such aggression.
The Japanese guns were too big and too many.
Johnston is dead in the water and crippled, and these Japanese destroyers are just firing round after round after round into the ship. And finally, Johnston sinks, and one of the Japanese commanding officers was observed to actually salute the U.S. ship as it went down.
What happened to Evans?
Evans was last seen going into the water as the ship sank, and then never seen again.
So how does the battle end?
and the Japanese commander turns away. He's on a do-or-die mission, yet he turned back.
It was one of the most brave last stands of a naval vessel in history, a true David and Goliath battle.
And the largest naval battle ever fought on this planet.
The Johnston is a burial ground as sacred as Arlington National Cemetery. Before Victor Vescovo left, he paid final tribute to Commander Ernest Evans and the men who followed him into battle.
To the Johnston.
For CBS This Morning Saturday, David Martin, The Pentagon.
Story we were all saying,
I know.
I didn't know.
Yeah,
No.
and at 21,000 feet, 4 miles down, that's almost twice as deep as the Titanic.
Yeah, it sounds like a battle that truly changed the war.
Worth remembering.
Oh,
Right now, let's take a look at the weather for your weekend.
Thanks again for listening to our broadcast here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 3255. We're always proud to demonstrate our military might in the sacrifices that has been made in having what we have today. But at the same time, we're always umptious to want to do things in a civilized tone towards bringing some sort of diplomacy in every type of situation, towards trying to work it out rather than going directly into the arms of battle. And the reason why is because the battle leaves so many scars, not just with the individuals that had sacrificed, but with their families, with their wives, their husbands, their brothers or sisters, etc., etc. The war, the scars of war are endless, that I wish that no one had to engage upon. And we know who struck the first lick. We know who started the battle, the spiritual battle, the supernatural battle. It was Lucifer and those that followed after Lucifer. We know by knowing history and knowing the Bible, we know who ultimately created all this anguish and harsh and all this pain and agony and misery that we all have to go through on a day-to-day, sometimes level, of just to be able to survive. We know who the perpetrator was that initiated this. One day, and soon, he will get what is coming to him and the third that followed with him. One day, true justice will be fallen upon not only the humanity form, but also in the spiritual form. Thanks again for listening to us, and good luck. Good luck to each and every one of us as we go through life, learning and observing that in which what we have been taught and know to be real versus fake, in honor of them. God bless. And God bless their souls. And shalom.